They were only 10 years old. Two fragile twin girls hidden away where no child should ever be, buried beneath earth and shadow, trapped behind iron and silence. No one searched. No one even whispered their names. It was as if the world had erased them before it ever realized they were missing. Days slipped into nights, and nights into something darker. Above them, life went on. But beneath the rusted grate of an old cellar, two young hearts beat faintly against despair. Until one evening, when a man who carried his own failures like chains and a dog with sharper instincts than memory stepped into a part of Willow's Creek that most people had forgotten. Deputy Cole Harrison, a name that used to hold promise before a single mistake shattered his career, and Shadow, his 5-year-old German shepherd, scarred but unbroken, together walked into that silence. What happened next would tear open secrets that had been stitched shut for years. A faint cry, a pricked ear, a moment that decided everything. This is where their story begins. A story that pulls apart lies, unmasks false identities, and lifts a mother's prayer out of the grave where everyone thought it had been buried. It is the story of how a dog heard what the world ignored, and how love, justice, and a quiet, stubborn hope refused to die. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if you've ever believed that even in the darkest places there can still be light. Stay with us, because this story will break your heart and then piece it back together again. The sky above Willow's Creek pressed low and heavy, painted in slate gray and swollen with rain that had not yet fallen. It was the kind of sky that warned rather than promised. February's bite still lingered in the air, though the snow was gone, leaving behind crusted ice at the edges of roads and a raw wind that cut straight through bone. The land itself seemed forgotten. Weathered barns with leaning frames, peeling paint on shuttered stores, and long roads stitched with potholes curling into pine-covered hills that stood like watchmen over a fading town. Cole Harrison steered his patrol SUV down one such road and rolled to a stop at the end of a cul-de-sac most maps didn't bother naming anymore. He turned the key, letting the engine fall silent. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring through the windshield at a line of houses that hadn't seen life in years. Their windows, broken or boarded, gaped back at him like blind eyes. A rusted swing creaked somewhere, swaying gently in the restless wind. Beside him sat Shadow. The shepherd didn't need introductions. With his sable coat, proud posture, and amber eyes that seemed to see a fraction of a second before the rest of the world, he looked less like a pet and more like a sentinel carved from instinct and loyalty. Once, Shadow had been trained for K-9 work in Seattle, a partner in dangerous rescues, a name known on the force. That was before the night everything unraveled, the night Cole chose the wrong door, the wrong second, and 2 children didn't make it out alive. Seattle had buried him in headlines and lawsuits, but it was the guilt that buried him deeper. Shadow had nearly died that night too, ribs crushed by falling debris. Cole had sworn never to let his dogs suffer for his mistakes again. That vow had carried them here, to Willow's Creek, a small town where the world stopped asking questions. Cole glanced sideways at his partner. Shadow wasn't relaxed. His head was high, ears pricked forward, gaze fixed on a sagging house 2 lots down. The place leaned against its own decay, porch slumped beneath years of neglect, trash, and dry leaves, pressed into corners. Even from the SUV, Cole could see the collapse of an upstairs wall where wallpaper still clung, pink with faint teddy bear patterns, the ghosts of a child's bedroom. "Yeah," Cole muttered, voice low and rough. "I see it too." He pulled, his gloves tighter, and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The cold wind slapped his face, carrying the sour smell of wet wood and rust. Shadow moved ahead with purpose, nose skimming the air, tail stiff, Not aggression, but focus. The kind of focus Cole had learned to trust. The front door of the house was nailed shut with iron so corroded it looked older than the trees around. He wasn't planning on forcing it. That was when it came, so faint he almost mistook it for wind. A sound. Not words at first, just the suggestion of a cry drifting on air too thin to carry much of anything. Shadow's body stiffened, a growl rumbling low in his chest before he shot left toward the side yard. Cole followed fast. His heart raced in his ribs before his mind had caught up. The fence was half collapsed, spilling into a tangle of tall grass and skeletal garden beds that hadn't seen planting in decades. Then Shadow stopped, rigid, at a drainage grate sunk into the earth, orange with rust, strangled by weeds. Cole dropped to his knees. He pressed his ear close. At first, only hollow air and the groan of the wind echoed back. Then he heard it again. A voice. Thin. Cracked. A child's voice whispering through the dark. Help! Cole's breath froze. His throat closed for a second. Then he found his voice. "This is Deputy Harrison," he called, steady but urgent. "Can you hear me down there?" Shadow barked once, sharp, insistent, like a signal flare in the silence. Cole's hands moved fast, yanking his radio from his belt. "Dispatch! This is Unit 4. I've got children trapped, repeat, children trapped, in what looks like a storm drain or cellar. Abandoned house, 77 Lincoln Drive. I need backup and medics now." The reply came fast, clipped, and professional. "Copy that, Unit 4. Help on the way." Cole shoved the radio aside and grabbed for his crowbar in the SUV. The grate was chained, but age had weakened it. Rust gave way with a groan of protest. Stale air rushed out, damp earth, mildew, despair heavy enough to taste. He leaned down again. "Hold on," he called softly. "I'm getting you out." "The girls." Cole said. "Nothing." She looked up at him. "You okay?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was hoarse. They were just curled up like they'd been forgotten. Lucia stood slowly, brushing snow from her knees. "You didn't forget them." "No," Cole said, eyes locked on the space where the cellar had been. "But someone did." Back at the medical center, the girls were cleaned, fed, and given warm clothing. A nurse named Jenna Reeves, a petite woman with cropped auburn hair and a silver nose ring, brought in mugs of broth and whispered encouragements. She had a calming presence, the kind that made children instinctively trust her, and had previously volunteered at shelters for abused youth. Hazel asked if Shadow could stay. "Only for a little while," Jenna said, smiling. "He's on special patrol." Shadow lay by the foot of their bed for the next 3 hours. Lucia ran a series of quiet tests in the hallway, measuring his cortisol levels, checking reflexes. "There's something familiar in how he reacted to them," she said to Cole. "Like he's carrying memory echoes. It's rare but not unheard of in Tramatra dogs. If he's seen something like this before?" Cole nodded slowly. "Seattle," he said. "Last spring, a boy. Similar case. Did the boy make it?" Cole didn't answer. Lucia stepped closer, watching the way his eyes shadowed. "You never forgave yourself." He gave a faint shrug, a gesture more tired than dismissive. "I shouldn't be the one who found them," he said, "but I'm glad I did." Lucia reached out and squeezed his arm once. "You didn't just find them, you saw them. That's more than most ever do." Later that night, Cole sat alone on the bench outside the clinic. Shadow leaned against his legs, ears perked, watching the doorway. "They said their names were Hazel and Holly Brookie," Cole murmured. He glanced down at his notepad, then toward the road. "Who the hell is Travis Bell?" The rain came steady the next morning, soaking the streets of Willows Creek in a dull, reflective sheen. Mist clung to the fields beyond town like memory, low and dense, refusing to rise. Outside the sheriff's office, the American flag rippled weakly in the wind, and Cole Harrison stood beneath the overhang, sipping coffee gone cold. Inside, the station buzzed with more movement than usual. For a town with barely 3,000 residents, the rescue of 2 missing children was a rare and rattling event. And behind it all was the one name that now repeated like a sour echo across every hallway: Travis Bell. Cole stepped into the briefing room where a woman was already waiting, a binder. On her lap, rain still dotting the shoulders of her tan trench coat. She was in her early 40s, of medium height, with thick-rimmed glasses and graying curls pinned into a bun that had half fallen out from rushing. Her presence was orderly, methodical, the kind of person who turned chaos into paperwork and back again. But behind her brown eyes was a different weariness, the kind born not of fatigue, but of knowing too much. She stood when she saw Cole. Deputy Harrison Elena Moore, Child Protective Services, Salem office. Cole shook her hand. "Thanks for coming." "I was already halfway here," Elena said. "When I saw the report, the names, it clicked." Cole raised an eyebrow. "You've met the girls before. Number, but I've seen their file." She opened the binder with a practiced flick. "Hazel and Holly Brookie, twins, 10 years old. Case originated in Portland nearly 3 years ago. Their mother, Margaret Brookie, goes by Maggie, had a severe mental health crisis, post-traumatic stress compounded by depressive episodes. She was placed in care in Idaho after she was found disoriented and wandering along a highway." Cole leaned forward and the girls. Elena tapped the page. "At the time, they were with a family friend, Travis Bell, who claimed Maggie had abandoned them. He submitted paperwork to assume temporary guardianship. Since she couldn't testify under psychiatric hold, he was granted limited custody pending follow-up." Cole frowned. No one followed up. "That's the thing," Elena said grimly. "The case was flagged for transfer to local agencies. Somewhere along the line, it got dropped, misfiled. For nearly 3 years, there's been no home visits, no contact. The case went dark." Cole's jaw clenched. "So," he lied, took custody, and disappeared. "Anne likely pocketed the financial support," Elena said, her voice sharp. "Over $1,000 a month unaccounted for. Where is Maggie now? Still at a facility in northern Idaho. She's stable now, has been for over a year. Keeps asking about her daughters, but Ellen aside, she was told the girls were placed into adoption. She's been writing letters." Cole rubbed his temples, letters that never reached them. Elena nodded once. "We failed her and those kids." Across town, Lucia stood in her clinic office, a worn leather-bound journal in her hands. She hadn't meant to find it. It had been tucked beneath a torn fleece blanket that had come with the girls from the hospital. Someone had stuffed their belongings in an old duffel bag. The journal was nearly falling apart. Pages curled from moisture. Its spine cracked. Inside was a name: Maggie Brookie. Lucia flipped carefully through the first few pages. Lists, medication schedules, fragments of confused thoughts, sketches of Hazel and Holly's faces side by side, always with hearts around their names. Then, folded between pages near the end, was a piece of lined paper nearly translucent with creases. It was a letter. "Dearest Hazel and Holly, I'm sorry I'm not there. I want to be. Every breath I take, I imagine. Holding your hands again, brushing the hair from your faces, telling you how brave you are. If someone reads this to you, or if by some miracle you find it, know that I never gave you away. Never would. I had an illness. Not the kind with coughs or fevers, but one that made the world too loud, too dark. I thought I was a monster, but I'm trying to come back for you. Love always. Mom." Lucia stared at the paper until the words blurred. The script was shaky but beautiful. The kind you wrote when your hands trembled, but your heart needed to speak. Her throat tightened. Shadow was lying nearby, eyes half-lidded, tail flicking once at the sound of her breath catching. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered. "You knew they weren't abandoned." She grabbed her phone and dialed Cole. Back at the station, Cole had begun, drafting the warrant for Travis Bell's arrest when Lucia arrived in person, soaked from the rain, the journal wrapped in a towel. "This was with the girl's things," she said, handing it to him. He scanned the letter, every word a quiet bomb. His fingers gripped the paper harder than he meant to. "She didn't run," he muttered. "She was sick, and he made it look like she was evil." Lucia nodded. "We have to get her back. Let her speak for herself. She might be the only one who can," Cole said. Outside, the sky darkened further. A storm was coming. Rain lashed the pines like whips as Cole gripped the wheel of his SUV, tires crunching across gravel that led out of Willows Creek and into the mist-veiled ridges that separated Oregon from Canada. Shadow sat upright in the passenger seat, ear stents, nose twitching, his body language unmistakable. The dog had locked on to something. A scent, a memory, a path carved through the dark. They were chasing a ghost. Travis Bell, last seen over a week ago, had vanished with practiced cowardice. But now, after tracking credit card activity and a trail of fraudulent medical forms submitted from the outskirts of the province, a tip had come in. A man matching Travis's description had been spotted squatting at an old cattle farm, long abandoned since the fires. The place was called Grayson Hill, a stretch of land swallowed by blackberry vines and soot-stained ruins. Locals avoided it. Even teenagers stayed away, which was saying something. Cole eased the vehicle off the main road. Wind howled through the broken trees. Rain pelted the windshield in chaotic rhythm. Shadow suddenly winded and pawed at the door. Cole stopped the car. They were close. Cole slipped out, hand on his holster, and nodded once. "Go." Shadow leapt into the wet underbrush like a whisper. Tailo, body tight. Cole followed. The barn appeared like a ghost through the trees, its roof half collapsed, one door swinging loose. Tracks in the mud told a story. Footprints irregular pacing, looping like a man unsure of himself. Inside it, stank of mold and burnt hay. Acrosine lantern flickered from behind a stack of crates. Travis Bell was exactly as described, late 30s, lean but sunken, hair matted and eyes darting like a trapped animal. He wore a flannel shirt soaked to the elbows and muddy boots. On a folding chair was a duffel bag stuffed with papers, envelopes, and the unmistakable glint of medication bottles. He didn't see Cole at first, but he saw a shadow. The dog appeared in the doorway, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from deep within. "Don't!" Travis barked, stumbling backward. Cole stepped in. "Hands up, Travis. Now you don't understand. They left me no choice. Hazel and Holly didn't choose Adam thing. You put them underground." Travis bolted. Cole gave chase. Rain and mud turned. The ground slick, but adrenaline gripped him. He vaulted a rotted trough, nearly losing footing. Travis scrambled toward the tree-ine, breath wheezing, slipping down an incline. Shadow launched. The dogs lammed into Travis mid-step, teeth clamping. Just above the wrist, Travis screamed, collapsed, mud and blood mixing in the torrent. Cole was there in seconds, cuffs out, Shadow backing off with one final bark. "You're under arrest," Cole panted, for unlawful imprisonment, fraud, and child endangerment. Travis sobbed as the cuffs clicked. Back at the station, Elena Moore was already reviewing the evidence. A team had gone to the barn and retrieved the duffel bag. Inside were not only falsified custody forms and Social Security applications, but also a copy of a life insurance claim filed 6 months prior under Maggie Brooks' name. The signature was forged. A half-burnt death certificate completed the lie. Cole sat across from Elena and Ruth Bellamy, a legal advocate from the Children's Justice Fund. Ruth was in her early 50s, slim with ash blonde hair and steel-rimmed glasses. Her voice was gentle but firm, and her specialty was unraveling lies in courtrooms built Tossilent's truth. "This," Ruth said, holding up the document, "is enough to bury him." Elena nodded. "And get Maggie restored." Ruth turned to Cole. "You showing up in court, too?" Cole looked through the glass where Shadow lay, curled by the hallway door. Wouldn't miss it. Thespring's sun had finally pierced through the Oregon gloom, casting golden rays over the town of Willows Creek like a fragile promise of healing. Daffodils leaned toward the light on hospital windowsills, and robins chirped wearily along the sidewalks. In the parking lot of Clearwater Psychiatric Center, Cole Harrison turned off the engine, his eyes on the rearview mirror where Hazel and Holly sat in the back seat, dressed in matching yellow sweaters and new jeans, their hands clasped tightly between them. Hazel, slightly taller, more outspoken, carried herself like someone older than 10, her mouth set in a brave but uncertain line. Holly, more delicate, held tightly to the ragged stuffed bear they'd found in the attic bunker. Neither of them had spoken since they left the courthouse that morning. Cole opened the back door. "You ready?" Hazel nodded once, though her lips trembled. Holly whispered, "Will she recognize us?" It was Elena Moore who met them at the entrance, her coat exchanged for a soft blue cardigan. Her eyes were gentler here, her clipboard left behind. "She's in the garden," she said. "She's having a good day." They walked slowly through the facility. Clearwater didn't smell like bleach and despair like most mental wards. It smelled of rosemary and clean sheets. Nurses moved quietly, greeting the girls with warm nods. One of them, a tall man with olive skin and silvering hair named Dr. Eilis, chewed. Harry met them at the patio. "She's lucid today," he said to Elena, "and calmer. We've been playing soft music things from her childhood. Help bring her back." He looked down at Hazel and Holly with gentle curiosity. "Are you her daughters?" Holly nodded. Dr. Choudhury smiled softly. "Then she's been waiting for you, even if she doesn't know it yet." Out on the patio, Maggie Brooke sat alone in a wicker chair, her hands folded around a cup of herbal tea. She was in her late 30s, but looked older, hair darker than the twins, hanging in soft, neglected waves, cheekbones sharp from months of fading appetite. Her eyes, pale green and wide, scanned the garden with quiet confusion. She wore a cream cardigan over a hospital issue blouse, and her feet were bare against the warm flagstones. When she saw them, she flinched. Hazel took a step forward. "Mama!" Maggie's head tilted, her mouth forming a silent word. She blinked several times as if trying to focus her vision. "I'm Hazel, and this is Holly." The woman didn't respond. Hazel turned to Cole, then back to her mother. Her voice cracked slightly, but she began to sing. "Starlight Waltz Under." "The moon, soft as your breath in my arms. Close your eyes, my lullaby blooms. Sleep safe where no one can harm." The final note trembled in the air. And then Maggie gasped, her teacup clattered to the ground. "My babies." She reached forward, trembling, hands shaking violently as she touched Hazel's hair, then cupped Holly's cheeks. "Oh, God! Oh, my girls! My girls!" The twins broke into sobs and threw themselves into her arms. Maggie crumpled, burying her face in their hair. From a distance, Lucia stood by the sliding glass doors. She hadn't spoken since their arrival, but now she quietly wiped her eyes, Shadow seated faithfully at her side. The dog had refused to stay in the car. He watched with an expression only dogs could wear. Knowing, protective, ancient. Dr. Choi nodded quietly to Elena. "It's real. The bond's still there." Elena stepped aside and called Cole's name. "She's strong," she said. Not perfect, but she's responding better every week. With supervised support, Maggie can regain custody. Cole nodded. We'll help. 2 weeks later, the Willows Creek courthouse was packed to the ceiling with townspeople. The story had made local headlines. Twin girls found alive. After 3 weeks missing, followed by town unites behind child abuse case. On trial was not only Travis Bell, but the cracks of every system that had failed to protect the innocent. Travis looked smaller than before in his orange jumpsuit, hand scuffed, a healing scar along his right forearm where Shadow had clamped down. His eyes flitted nervously across the courtroom, landing on no one. At the prosecution table sat Ruth Bellamy, the composed and razor-sharp attorney from the Children's Justice Fund. She wore a navy suit and thin gold earrings. Her words were soft, but every sentence was a nail driven into the coffin of Travis's defense. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not just about abuse, she said. It is about deception calculated for profit, lies told to silence love, and cruelty masked as care. Over the next 3 days, witnesses came and went. Elena revealed the falsified custody documents. Lucia, who submitted the journal and letter, as evidence. Dr. Chudery, who confirmed Maggie's improving condition and her mental fitness when the children were initially taken. And finally, Cole. He stood tall in his deputy's uniform, voice low but steady. They weren't just hidden away, he said. They were buried alive. If not for a dog who wouldn't ignore the wind, we might never have heard them. The jury returned in less than 5 hours. Guilty. Travis Bell was sentenced to 32 years in state prison. No possibility of parole. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. As Travis was led out, someone shouted, "Monster!" A woman in a gray hoodie hurled a carton of eggs. One hit him square in the chest, yellow and sticky. Another followed. A group of mothers from the local elementary school stood united, arms crossed. They didn't move to stop the others. Cole made no move to intervene. Some justice was better served cold. Spring arrived in Willows Creek, not with fanfare but with a quiet kind of grace, wildflowers lining the trails, sunlight lingering longer on porches, and the breeze soft enough to lull even old fears to rest. In a modest white cottage on Maple Lane, life was beginning anew. Maggie Brookie stood barefoot in the kitchen, apron dusted in flour, slicing apples for a pie she hadn't made in years. Her short chestnut hair curled softly at her temples now. And, though the weight of the past hadn't vanished entirely, it no longer defined her. Her daughters were humming a tune in the next room, Hazel's voice clear and bright, Holly softer, but steady. They were whole again. Not perfect, but whole. Shadow lay sprawled across the living room rug, his ears twitching with every sound, but his body completely at ease. Since the trial, he hadn't returned to the precinct. Cole had tried gently after the commination ceremony, but Shadow refused to enter the police kennel. He growled low, tail stiff, ears back, not out of aggression, but something closer to grief. Cole understood. Shadow had been restless 4 days after the girls were found, pacing the porch, sleeping beside Hazel's bed, whimpering when she cried out in sleep. On the 5th night, after a particularly vivid nightmare had jolted Holly awake, the dog had gently climbed into bed between the two girls and stayed. The next morning, Maggie found them all tangled in sleep, 2 small bodies curled around a large, sable-furred one. That afternoon, Cole brought Shadow's vest and badge to the house. He knelt beside the dog, looked him in the eye, and whispered, "You've done your duty, old friend. You've earned your peace." Shadow licked his hand and turned, back toward the porch, lying down with a heavy sigh. He had made his choice. 2 weeks earlier, the courtroom had fallen silent as Travis Bell, pale, unshaven, and expressionless, stood before Judge Mary Ann Corwin. The evidence had been damning and irrefutable. Falsified guardianship documents, misappropriated welfare funds. medical lies about Maggie's condition, and the horrific illegal imprisonment of 2 children. The final blow came from Eleanor Moore, who delivered Maggie's psychiatric evaluation, and from Maggie herself. Calm, clear, and painfully sincere on the witness stand when the verdict was read. 32 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. There were no cheers, just a long collective breath. Outside the courthouse, things were different. A crowd had gathered, parents, teachers, a few veterans from the shelter where Maggie had once volunteered. And when Travis was escorted out, handcuffed and hollow-eyed, a woman threw an egg that exploded against his shoulder. Another followed, then another. He flinched, but never looked up. That was his final walk through Willows Creek. Justice had arrived, not as revenge, but as restoration. Back on Maple Lane, Shadow had found a new rhythm. He still responded to Cole's whistle during emergencies, still raised his ears at distant sirens, but he was no longer a dog bound to duty. He was family. And Hazel. She followed him everywhere, through the backyard garden to school drop-off, even to the vet clinic where Lucia gave him regular checkups. Lucia had started teaching weekend classes at the community center on animal therapy and emotional first aid. She often brought Shadow and even rescued 2 kittens, one of whom, a bossy gay tabby named Freckle, despite no actual freckles, had taken to riding on Shadow's back like royalty. Cole, now permanently stationed in Willows Creek, had shifted too. He smiled more, laughed sometimes, and most importantly, he showed up, not just for work, but for people, for Lucia, for Maggie, for the girls. The spring festival arrived on a soft Sunday morning. Banners fluttered from the lampposts. Tables overflowed with homemade crafts and pies. Children darted through the square with balloons and cotton candy in hand. At the heart of the park, a new, bronze statue stood. Shadow, ears alert, nose pointed forward, mid-step as though still searching. The plaque below read, Shadow, the dog who heard what others ignored. Mayor Carmichael, eyes misty, spoke of courage in unexpected places. Lucia stood, beside Maggie and the girls. Cole stood slightly off to the side, hands in his pockets, his smile barely hidden. Hazel clutched Shadow's leash as they walked together through the crowd. The dog wore a garland of blue cornflowers and wild rosemary. People stepped aside for them, not out of fear, but reverence. Near the end of the day, Hazel knelt beside the statue, arms around Shadow's thick neck. "You could have gone with Officer Cole," she whispered into his ear. "You could be chasing bad guys." Shadow looked up at her, wise, unblinking. "But you chose us." She smiled. "You knew we needed someone, and you didn't just save us. You made me believe the world still has good in it." Shadow closed his eyes, resting his head on her lap. Maggie joined them moments later, wrapping both daughters and their guardian dog into her arms. The sun dipped low, scattering golden light through the cherry blossoms. They didn't need more words. The light had returned, and they were home. Sometimes, miracles don't come with lightning or voices from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly on 4 legs with gentle eyes and a heart that simply refuses to give up. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, God is still working, still watching, and still sending help in ways we might never expect. Maybe today someone out there feels forgotten. Maybe someone is carrying more than they can bear. But this story is proof. Healing is possible, justice is real, and love, real love, never loses its way home. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave us a comment and tell us what part moved you most. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story of light in the shadows. May the Lord bless and protect you, and may you always have a shadow by your side.